Hey guys, thanks very much for joining us for another Elite Coach Live. Coming to you every single week, bringing you information, stories, anything that we feel will inspire you to move you forward on your journey to becoming the elite coach that you want to become. If you listen to us on Spotify, please make sure that you subscribe, ring the bell, do what you need to do so you make sure that you don't miss out on any episodes. And likewise, if you're watching us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're consuming the content, make sure that you do hit that like button because it helps us out. We truly appreciate it. It knows that we're having a positive impact on you guys, but also you can keep up to date with these weekly bite-sized information that hopefully will help have a positive impact. And on that, I am joined by a man that kind of caught me off guard with poor questions in a recent immersion session, but off the back of it, came out a story that I was very keen to sort of share with you guys because I think it's important. I think all the time we're too busy get sucked into the world of moving forward or comparing ourselves to the best coaches in the world and stuff. So I wanted to really share the story that we've got today. So I'm joined by Mr. Tom Bassett. Tom, how are we doing, sir? We all good?
Yes, we're marvellous. We are marvellous.
Good stuff. Filled full of caffeine and we're raring to go, mate, right?
Absolutely. My legs jiggling away quite nicely.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So guys, so Tom, let's jump straight into it. Just tell the guys a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, nice and easy question to start off with. Basically, I'm a dad of two, most importantly of all. So it's a very busy lifestyle. But go back a few years and I've been constantly physically active. I had a couple of, I say that I had a little bit of a spat, which I'll talk about shortly. And but yeah, I was one of those really weird kids at school. So I was the kid who would be at rugby training half an hour early running around the pitch. I was doing press ups, 14, 15 years old. I understood the importance of being fitter and stronger and more competitive for no other reason that I can really place. And it's never left me. It's always been there. Even when I was playing rugby up to about 4 years ago, I was still there half an hour early, plodding around the pitch and doing some press ups and doing some drill work. I still box. I'm still very active, as much as I can be now. And I'm just a very active person. And it's been the root of who I've become and why I am who I am today.
Yeah. Is there anything that you could sort of, I know you said you can't really pinpoint it, but was there any sort of moment in time, possibly looking at sport and heroes or influences that you think led you down that path of just being that relentless pursuit of better?
Well, I think, pardon the cliche, but my dad, he was very inspirational to me right through to my life, right to the end of his life in October last year. He was someone, when I told him I was playing rugby, it was our first sort of year 7 at school. And I said, Dad, we could play competitive like contact rugby. And my dad just looked at me. He said, you never go down, you run straight. And that was it. That was his advice to me to play rugby at like 11, 12 years old. You run straight, you don't go down. So I never went down without a fight, and I couldn't sidestep for the life of me. I could barely pass, but I could run straight, and I'd always hit that game line. And I realised then that I wanted to be better. I wanted to be fitter. I wanted to be stronger. And I think the next person after that was our rugby teacher called Mr. Turton, who was a British Lions player before they went professional. And he never took his Lion shirt off, and he still wore his tiny white shorts. So he was standing in the middle of the rugby pitch on a freezing cold day with a wind and rain belting, and he'd be stood there. And he'd be watching you walk across the pitch. And he's kind of clicked on that I was different. And he would say to me, run another lap or do some sprint work, get your fitness up, get stronger. And that's, just no real information, just get fitter and get stronger. That was it. But this guy was 6'6". He was a Lions player, looked like Frankenstein's monster. but he was just an inspiration. So I had two very inspirational people right from the early on, but with no real guidance. Just run straight, get fitter, and get stronger. You work out how. So I did.
No, that's awesome. That plant tiny acorns and get massive acorn trees, right? That's it's absolutely fantastic. I love that, and it's great that they've just kept it very, very simple. A perfect advice for a kid, isn't it? Just do this, and all will work out well. And it sounds like it has, mate. Which is fantastic. So let's fast forward a little bit. So I take it your passion for sport and fitness is kind of what led you down the coaching route, or was there another incident that led you down the coaching route then?
I was always, I again, pardon the cliche, but I was always that coach. I was always that kid. I was always that one who tried to get the other lads to run around the pitch. I was always that one who, if the coach said, "Oh, we're going to do this or this," I'll be like, "Well, we do both." I was just that way mentally. I was just a bit weird. And this is 20 years ago. I'm nearly 40. So 25, 26 years ago, even the England first 15 weren't playing, or they weren't like specifically training sports and conditioning for elite level rugby. I kind of had an understanding of fitness and conditioning at, 14 years old. So I was always trying to help people. I was always trying to get them running. I was trying to get them doing press-ups. I was trying to get them doing contact work and bag work, because that's how you improve. That's how you got better, by doing drills and skills. And then I built up a reputation for that. And then I was the kid in the school gym, even though it was the old box cupboard, had a treadmill and a fixed rig machine. But I'd be the one in there. It would be me in there. Trying to get other people in there. So I had an understanding of it very early on, and I understood PE, physical education. I'm dyslexic, so I struggle reading. I think I understood PE because there were pictures. And also I could go out onto a rugby pitch and I could play around with anaerobic training, aerobic training. I could play around with lactate threshold training. I could play around with sprint work. I could play around with endurance work, because that's just how my mind was working. That's just where I was pushing it. And then at a point in time, I think my middle brother, again, was a big part of my life, inspirationally, and my eldest brother, my eldest sister were both county swimmers. Eldest brother was actually county triathlon, so he was a very fit man. And my middle brother, I joined the Royal Marines, so two very fit idols. And I was determined to play rugby until I stopped growing at the massive height of 5'8" and a fag paper. So I was deemed as being too short for number 7, which really annoyed me, because I was a good player and I actually didn't get through to school's under-17s England trials because my opposite number was 6'2" at 16 years old. So I didn't really stand much chance, but I outplayed him. I mean, I hand on heart, I outplayed him. And a lot of the guys knew on my team and the other team, because we're all mixed schools, they knew I was a better number 7. It was just unfortunate. I just stopped growing. So I decided then to go into the military, follow my brother into the Royal Marines. And I was too young. I was still enjoying life. I found girls. So between the ages of 18 and 21, I was just very active, just playing rugby. I was boxing. I was learning to do weight training and listening to my brother's advice. Because at that point in time, he was the guru. He'd come home from weekend training and I'd be like, what did he do? What did he do? Oh, we had to do fireman's carries up, 13-mile runs and do fireman's carries, or do a Bergen march, or do 100 press-ups in 2 minutes, or whatever it was, just whatever came out of his mouth. I would be that week later practicing just in my bedroom with my little vinyl weight set, trying to replicate that training. And I'd run up the hills. I do all sorts of weird stuff. And when he was home, we'd go for a run. So I was very fit, and I had a very physical job, putting marquees up. So I was very fit, very physically strong. And then April 26, 2006, I had a near fatal car crash.
Wow. There you go. There's just a lot to pack in even before that. And before we get to the car crash, it reminds me, because I remember listening to Will Greenwood talk, very similar situation. And he was similar. Like they were saying, you're not big enough to play rugby. You're too gangly. You feel like a beanpole. You're never going to succeed. And he sort of took that on. And luckily, he sort of kept on battling through, and he got the break. But I imagine there's plenty of people in the same position as yourself. Is they put on an anthropometric marker and just said, "No, that's it. You never." Yeah. So how did that? Did you sort of feel like you turned up a notch in your physical stuff, or did you sort of say, "Right, okay, I'm going to go and do something else, or put my energy elsewhere"? What was that sort of instilling in you there?
I tried to work out if I could grow anymore. So I looked back at my family history and found out the tallest person in my family was my dad, about 6 foot. So genetically, it was impossible. And then I actually remember going to an open day down at Limpstone, again with my parents, see my brother in his training, and his corporal. So this was just after I kind of qualified for under-17s trials. And we were chatting away, and he said, "So you're going to join the Royal Marines one day, young man, and be a Green Marine, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "No, I'm going to play for England." And he was like, "Do you know that the Royal Marines, we put several players through into the national level and international level teams?" I was like, "No, I didn't. I've only named a few players who were ex-Royal Marines and ex-Army and logistics signals." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Thanks very much. Nice to know." And then once I didn't get through the trials, I actually remember that conversation. I thought, right, there's another way for me to do this. I can get in the Royal Marines, and I can play rugby for the Royal Marines, and I could go that way. So that was then the kicker. So there was never like, "Oh, I'm too short, life's hard, life's this, life's that." It was, there's another way. I've been told there's another way of doing this. It's a long way. It's a long way around. Like, join the Royal Marine Commandos just to play rugby for England or Gloucester, because that's my home club. I was like, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. 36 weeks of basic training. Yeah, I could do that. I'll be fit. So So there was no obstacle in my mind. There was just find another way. Yeah,
that's awesome. And there's so many different life lessons that you can take away from that, and I absolutely love that. Is one door closes, there's always another option. You can go around, you go around the wall, or you climb over the door, to get through. So I absolutely love that, mate. So that's fantastic.
One of the frustrating parts for me actually was that Neil Back was actually then beginning to enter his England international playing side, and he was 6'1", I think, or 6'2".
Yeah.
He was one of the shorter flankers, and I was like, I'm only a little bit shorter than he is. I'm only a little bit shorter, and so I started playing how he played. I started to watch how he played and started to mimic his playing, which was already a similar aspect to mine. He was a very supportive player, and he was always in the ruck, and he was always in the middle of the mauls. So I started replicating that. I started playing that same tune, So he was I just popped into my head actually. He was someone else I idolized as well, because he was my height. In my head, he was my height, and he had the same challenges as me, and he was where I wanted to be, just 6-7 years ahead of me.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting in that, and I think human beings, we typically do that, but I think the biggest difference in that story there is you looked at that and went, right, there's a path. Somebody's already walked the path that I want to go down, so I am going to walk the path. There's a difference between seeing the path and walking the path, right?
Yeah.
And I think the fact that you put somebody there, where I think what a lot of people do these days is to see somebody who's doing what they want to do, they can see the path, but they'd never do the walking of the path. They never take that first step. They never get started for one reason or another. And I think it's really interesting that those series of events which led you to that and, built into that mindset,
Yeah, and it didn't really come from anywhere. That was the thing. There was, self-help books, where if you were reading a self-help book, you were classed as being a bit hippie and a bit weird and a bit, out there, or you were mentally deranged. You needed to have a book to tell you how to breathe. Nowadays, it's very common knowledge. Nowadays, there's multi-millionaires teaching people how to breathe with a nose. So there was none of that, and there wasn't the opportunity in the information back then either. I used to read books. My bookcase is still full of books I used to read when I was 15 years old, 16 years old. Ranulph Fiennes, the explorer, Fit for Life book. That, in my opinion, is one of the best books about physical development, because he was developing that book way before scientific studies were even happening. And that was based on his own experience when he was in, I think he was SAS Reserves, wasn't he? He went through that experience. So there wasn't information up there, and it was just a case of reading it and doing it. And they're reading it and doing it and making a mistake and doing it again. And the other thing I used to do when I was in learning to do weight training and in my rehabilitation as well, I find the biggest guy in the gym and I'd walk up to him. And normally I went to a Spit and Sawdust gym because they were cheap. And I find the biggest guy in the gym and say, look, I've got to rebuild my shoulder. I've had a car crash. I need to rebuild my strength of my shoulder. How do I do it? There's no point asking the smallest guy in the gym, lifting the smallest weight. Ask the biggest guy in the gym, how do I do it? I want to learn. How do I rebuild the muscles in my shoulder? And, they would generally give you some advice. They generally say, well, do this and this. And that's where I learned sets and reps, power training, strength training, and all that. And then it was a case of just reading more books.
Yeah, it's interesting that, and I like that, because I think a lot of people underestimate the value that you get from a book, because I think a lot of people look at, it takes somebody half an hour to write a blog post. It takes you 10 minutes to read it, or it takes them a couple of hours. But when somebody writes a book, anybody who's written a book knows it takes a long time. But actually, within inside that book, and Ranulph Fiennes' book's perfect example, but any book that you pick up, just because it took them 1 year, 2 years to write that book, doesn't mean there's 2 years worth of information. There's like 10, 15, 20 years, if not more, of learning in that book. And you can pick that up, depending on how quick you read. You can read that book in 2 weeks, a month, whatever, but you can get 20 years worth of knowledge in a month. But yet people won't spend $7.99 on a book or something. It's just madness, isn't it? Absolute madness.
They're gold dust. Absolute gold. If you can get a good book and you can read a book, even just by someone who's... I've written a book. I've written my own little book. And it's like, that's a combination of 20 years of experience and training and self-development, mental development, personal development. And you've got to condense it down to like 74 pages. And you just kind of think that's the best part of my knowledge in that book. There's more to come, but, it's exactly that. And I always think if a book can inspire you to get out the house and go for a walk, it's a good book. Yeah. If the book can get you to a gym, it's a good book. And that's more powerful than I think than any YouTube video or anything, because you can watch it and you can think, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. And you don't. Because you get distracted by social media and you start flicking through and you start watching clips from Family Guy rather than reading a book and just divulging that page or that little chapter and going, I understand how aerobic system that works. So I can go out and do a gentle 5K run and not pressure myself mentally because I'm going for an aerobic run. I'm not sprinting around it. I'm just going to go out and get my heart rate up and get my breathing up and just run 5K because I want to enjoy it. I don't want to feel like I'm dying. So you understand the principles of it much better.
Yeah, I like what Jim Rohn says about books. As soon as you get the idea, act upon it straight away. I think it's great. He says you don't need to read the book, but as soon as you see somebody recommend a book, and that's why I think Amazon one click is great, but also very dangerous for me, because as soon as I see a book recommendation, it's like, I'll get the book, because as soon as the idea is there, I order it, right? Straight away. Yeah. So let's take us back. I know you briefly mentioned it there. So obviously, Marines going through your training and stuff like that, and then this big life event and this car crash happened. So, I mean, let's just start from the top. Kind of what happened, what occurred. Just share as much or little as detail of what impact that had on you.
Laurie's really hurt. So
there you go, guys. There's a big takeaway there. There's a big takeaway.
So Laurie's really, really hurt. So I'm just going to quickly show you my daughter. She's coming. There we go.
There you go. Look at that. A special guest as well.
Come on, let me go. Okay. You want to come back up? Okay. Right, so
this is real podcasting right here,
yes,
guys. This is real podcasting. This is on the coal face.
So the crash happened April 26th, 2006. And we were working at Bathurst Showground. Thank you. We were working at Bathurst Showground. And there's a little lay-by. And we were in for breakfast. I won't bore you too much, but basically the crux of the story is a lorry flashed his headlights and gave a hand gesture. So there were two vans from the same company. I was in the second van. And because we were in a burger bar, we thought he was coming for his break. You can kind of see where this is going. 33-ton lorry, doing 30 miles an hour, fully loaded with milk. He saw the other van, recognised the driver, waved, flashed his lights, or say, "Oh, mate, how's it going?" And me and my passenger thought he was letting us out, so I pulled out and he hit the van at 30 miles an hour. He didn't have a time to put his foot on the brake, so it was a full impact. I was crushed basically like that. So my right shoulder got dropped, pushed into the van. My head got thrown that way. In the middle of the van was a former bodybuilder. He was a big guy, probably 23, 25 stone. He crushed into me, punctured my lung, broke 2 ribs, along with the seatbelt, breaking my rib up here as well. All the trauma from my right shoulder, right hip, right knee, right ankle, and big cut to my head. From head down, I had concussion. I had inflamed heart. Well, I can't remember what the condition's called. It's where the heart basically has a massive trauma and just slightly expands a little bit. Punctured lung, 3 broken ribs, bruised kidney, bruised liver, bruised spleen, torn abdominal muscles, torn lower back muscles, impact trauma right hip, impact trauma right knee, impact trauma right ankle. The biggest kicking in you've ever had. I was deemed as kind of dead on sight. Blessed be to God that, weirdly enough, at the burger bar there was an off-duty air ambulance paramedic. Wow. He just finished his shift and he was having a cup of tea, and he saw the whole thing. He ran over to the van, and one of the far side passenger, because it's a Ford Transit, the far side passenger, due to the big guy in the middle, had pushed him out the window and crushed me. They were both taken out. One was taken to Gloucester Royal as a walking wounded. The big guy in the middle, he was taken to Bath University Hospital, and I was airlifted to Bath University Hospital and put on ICU for 4 days, where I was left just in a very deep coma, almost not a coma, but very deeply unconscious. My mum and dad were told by the doctors, and my brothers and sisters were all there when they arrived, and the hospital priest was there because the doctors gave me 12 hours to live.
Wow. That's an incredible story, that, and there's so much to unpick from that. But, you know, I want to sort of highlight it because it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's that ripple effect of the actions that we have, or something happens to us, or what we do. Everybody thinks, oh, it's just this, but it's the ripple effect of the consequences, both positive and negative, that it has on the family and stuff. So have you discussed that with your family and stuff, of how they felt when they came in and stuff like that?
Yeah, my dad didn't talk about it. My mum doesn't talk about it. They both well up. Even my older sister wells up. So it's quite hard for them because I was unconscious. I knew nothing of it. You know, it was, I remember fleeting parts. So I remember the sound of the turbojets on the helicopter, and I remember the smell of aviation fuel. It's got a really powerful smell, and I can smell that now and again. So I've got PTSD with it. So I have reoccurring visions and reoccurring smell. from that trauma. So I have highlights of it, and I have snippets. And one of the things I did, which I kind of vaguely do remember, was I grabbed hold of a copper's vest as I was being taken to the helicopter. And I grabbed his vest while he was like there, and I pulled him down, and I said, "Tell my dad I'm okay. Tell my dad I'm okay." And I wouldn't let him go until he rang my dad, by all accounts, because my dad tells the little story, or he did. He was sat at home, and he had a phone call, and he could hear lots of noise in the background and the helicopter. And he said, all the copper said was, "I've been told to give you a call. Tom is okay, but we're going to get you to Bath University Hospital as quick as we can." So that's all he kind of ever talked about. Middle brother calls me an idiot. As brothers do. He's like, "You're an idiot." Yeah, thanks. Eldest brother, yeah, he's not, my brothers are completely north and south pole. Again, there's a little story about them too as well, actually. And so trauma wise, they don't talk about it. I've learned to be very open about it and very honest about it, because it helps me. It helps me recall it. It helps me put things back into perspective as well. But also, the recovery story is far better than the actual injury story.
So, yeah, and I mean, so do you think, obviously, going into your recovery now, then, first and foremost, I think, obviously hard for the family. You've always been strong, fit, active, running around like the rugby pitch, going half an hour earlier to training, and obviously they're seeing you in that state. I can imagine that'd be drawn. But thinking on that is, if you didn't do all of that additional training, put in the effort, do you reckon the scenario would have been any different? Do you reckon that strength and the fitness actually helped you?
Massively. It was the doctor who looked over me for 5 or 6 days when I was a bit more cosmos mentis and I was a bit more awake and just put on a normal ward. He actually came over to me and said, "The only reason you survived, to his belief, is because I was so physically strong," because I was very strong. I don't have my numbers. I can't tell you what I used to do, but I was weight training regularly. Plus, I worked for a marquee company. So I would pick up the big bales on my own. And these bales are probably 80 to 100 kilograms. And I picked them up on my own, and I'd carry them on one shoulder, one left, one right sometimes, not at the same time, alternately. But I'd pick these massive bales up. And I'd carry all the big beams. My foreman used to love it because he said, "We don't need a forklift, we've got Tom." So I was just very strong. I was very broad. I had great fitness. My heart, my lungs could just about tolerate. My heart just about tolerated the impact and the stress on my heart. So that's why it was sort of like inflamed. It was swollen or something. The heart lining had swollen, but it just about held on. And the muscularity I had around my shoulder, my hips, and my muscles in my back were absolutely right to sort of say, you can take a kick in, you can take a beat in, or you can just about survive this. You're just going to hold on to this because that's the consequence. It's the consequence of being fit and strong, is your body can tolerate more.
Yeah, it's incredible that. I think it's incredibly resilient, the human body, but I think it just puts the power and it puts it into perspective. Is if you treat your body when, and I hope nobody else goes through this situation or whatever, but in worst case scenario, when there's only just your physiology there to protect you and stuff, you want it to be in the best shape you can. So it's an advocate of being fit and strong. There's an advert right there, right? So obviously this has happened, you survived, obviously, and to start talking about what was kind of the stages you went through that, because obviously the recovery process isn't just like a 12-week, do a bit of shoulder abductions and adductions and, walk on a treadmill and off you pop, man. Like, that recovery process must have been relentless, both physically and mentally, right?
Yeah. One of the processes was not long after being released from hospital, after having physio of can you walk in a straight line and can you walk up and down the stairs? Yes, I can. Okay, we're signing you off that you're well. That's risky. You can barely move my arm. I remember being home for a couple of days, and I was in agony. I was in agony of my shoulder, my neck, and my back. And I went to a physio centre in Gloucester, and I rang them up. I said, I need to see someone immediately. I need to see someone as soon as possible. And they said, we've got an opening this afternoon. You'll be his last patient. Can you come in then? I said, yes, absolutely. My dad was at work, and my brother couldn't drive, so I had to get the bus in. So it starts off well straight away, but it's that mental strength. It's like the pain. So I went to physio, and he did the normal questions. And I remember the look on his face. He said, have you got any injuries I need to know about? I said, yes, I've got 2 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and I've got this shoulder damage. I said, but don't worry about any of that. I need you to sort my shoulder out. Because it was kind of like that. It was just all, and you could see it was messed up. And he'd done the whole sort of traction in it, trying to pull it out. And he said, I've got to manipulate your shoulder. Your scapula's all kind of the wrong way, and your back's kind of doing that, and your neck's kind of. My head's still not straight now. It sort of hangs weirdly. So he kind of folded my arms, gave me a pillow, folded my arms like that, and he just said, right, this is going to hurt. Breathe in, put his knuckles under your spine. We've all had it, and he just went, dunk. The pain was excruciating. The relief outweighed the pain. Because it just, my shoulder dropped, my back clapped. I think he did it twice, and I could actually sort of sit up for the first time. I could actually sit up properly and go, and not breathe like that, but I felt I could breathe. See like that to go. Okay, I can breathe again because my lungs and my shoulders weren't kind of squashed. But the look on his face was sheer terror.
Yeah.
So that was the start. Having that manipulation, having that massage. Unfortunately, I wasn't awarded any compensation because the law dictated that it was my fault. So I got no compensation. I wasn't working. Physio was very expensive. So I turned to the best thing, which was Nurofen, paracetamol, and alcohol. And I became Brofen dependent and alcohol dependent, just to try and not hurt.
Yeah.
And I had to earn some money. So after 8 or 9 weeks, I was back at work, doing back in my old job, working for a MRP company. I couldn't lift anywhere near what I used to. I couldn't work a full day. But also in that same respect, it gave me that physical movement. It gave me some resistance on my body. It challenged me mentally. It gave me a bit of stimulus. And I had that feeling of actual value and purpose because I was working in a small team. So my mental health was around people who knew I'd been in the crash. They all knew what happened to me, and they were forgiving. So if I fell asleep at lunchtime, I fell asleep. They left me to it. If I couldn't lift or I couldn't, I used to swing 2 14-pound sledgehammers at the same time and knock pegs in. I could bang in pegs all on my own for a full-size traditional marquee. I could barely lift a lump hammer, So my physicality may have improved 5%, but my mental health was plummeting out of control. To the fact that I was becoming Brofen dependent. I had Brofen for breakfast, snack, lunch, dinner, and midnight feast. And because alcohol, stupidly, is seen as socially acceptable, I was drinking. And I was in so much pain, and I was in so much of a disarray. I had no guidance. I had no one to turn to realistically. Because my mum and dad were split up very nastily. So I was speaking to my mum. My dad had his own health problems. My brother was going through his own problems after being leaving the Royal Marines. He was in his own mental dispute. And my sisters weren't that interested, and my eldest brother wasn't really about. So I just spiraled out of control. I was drinking every night. I ballooned, and I tried to kill myself a couple of times through alcohol consumption. I just tried to drink too much that I would wake up the next day. If that didn't work, I took Brufen with it, just to try and stop the pain mentally. To go from a level of activity where I was capable of joining the Royal Marine Commandos to barely being able to do 3 press-ups.
So they're like, it's almost like that mental pain then superseded the physical pain, where the physical pain was no longer the issue, which started the taking the painkillers and stuff like that. It then became, I need to take this from a mental point of view, and it needs to suppress the mental pain, or it's going to give me an out away from the mental pain, right?
Yeah, it was an out. If I wasn't awake, I wasn't in pain. And then I went to Australia. Honestly, I went to Australia in my own mind to not come home. I didn't want to come back. I didn't want to come home. You can draw that what you want, but I didn't want to come back.
Yeah.
So the conversion rate for the pound to the dollar was brilliant. So I went out with $7,500, and I probably drank the best part of $6,000 worth of alcohol.
Wow.
I'd wake up in the morning, falling downstairs. I'd wake up, I'd pissed the bed, I've shat myself, I've thrown up with myself. I've got into the shower, I've washed myself off, put some deodorant on, put some clean clothes on, and then gone to find the next bar. Because what else was I going to do? And the best thing from that, the saving grace from that, was my second cousins, my grandmother's sister's children. They live out in Australia, in Tasmania. And I went out and saw them, and myself and Ben were about the same age. And it was an excuse to drink VB and eat chickens and drink Tuies and get up in the morning, do 6 hours, 7 hours of work, go to the beach and repeat. But the mental growth had started to come back. I remember being in Tasmania. I went on the first run for probably a year. And it felt really good. I felt really good. And that's kind of the trigger. That was, I can't kill myself. I can't hurt myself. I can't cut myself. I'm just not that way wired. I just can't do that. I tried to find the long way of doing it. That failed. So I decided, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly, and I'm going to apply for the Royal Marine Commandos. So that was my ambition. That then became my intent to start my recovery process, to start my training all over again, to rebuild my fitness, to rebuild my mental health. Because what else was there to do? What else could I have done?
Yeah,
I could have, sank into a cesspit of alcohol and just become disillusioned that life's unfair. Or I could give myself a chance.
I think it's absolutely incredible story so far. But so obviously from the accident to ending up in Australia, that's a 12-month period, or was that longer?
No, that was 5. So April 26th, 2006 was a crash. November the 8th, 2006, I was in Australia. No, November the 11th, my sister's birthday. November 11th, I was in Australia, same year. So April to November. Okay. That shorter time period. Yeah. Because it was that point that I realised I couldn't do what I used to do. I was useless. I was fat. Everything hurts, and there's no point being around. I'm never going to play rugby for England. I'm never going to have that competition level. I'm never going to have the opportunity. So what's the point in life? What's the point? So
you mentioned there that you obviously you were living that lifestyle in Tasmania, but then something made you go for a run. That was the first time you'd been for a run since the accident. What was that? What was what was the point to say, right, come on, let's go for a run? What was the tipping point, the light switch moment there?
I was hoping I'd get bit by a copperhead snake, and I wouldn't return.
Right. So,
but I didn't.
You just constantly finding that position of, I need a way out. I need a way out. And from the years of physical activity and exercise, that was deemed as a way out. Still, a complete positive, negative, back to a positive though, right?
Yeah, bitten. Yeah, if I was bitten by a snake, by a very deadly snake, then none of my family would have to worry. They'd never be worried about, was it something we missed? Did we miss something? It was just, he was in Australia, he went for a run, he was bitten by a snake. They could live with that. That was my thought process. They could live with that. They could put that to bed. He was just bitten by a snake out on a run. Tom was coming back. Well, I didn't. And after the run, I had the shower, and I was kind of like, I enjoyed that. It wasn't as bad as I thought. I felt okay. I feel pretty good. So I went for another one with my cousin, my younger cousin, who's a bit younger than me. She was a very fit young lady. So we went for a little run, and I felt good doing that. I felt pretty good. And then I left Tasmania. I woke up and I went, I'm going home. I've got to go back to England. I've got to go home. I've got to start this training. I've got to start this process again. And I started running regularly. So I got to Canberra. I did a couple of laps around Canberra, and when I got back to Sydney, I ran a run from Sydney. I ran down to the harbour and back to the hostel. And then it was St. Patrick's Day. So I got very drunk on St. Patrick's Day in Australia, landed in the UK on St. Patrick's Day, got very drunk again. So I had 2 St. Patrick's Days in the same year. Not many people have that. And I had a Sydney shirt and a England shirt as well to prove it. So that was good fun. And then I decided to stop drinking. And it wasn't like a Alcoholics Anonymous program. I don't know. It wasn't. I can't remember the time process. But I remember my dad saying to me, "You've got a problem. You're drinking too much." And I just went, "No, I haven't. I'm in full control. Thank you very much." And I just remember going, "Bump." I stopped drinking for nearly a year.
Wow.
Because I'd come back. A part of me had clicked back in, that old self of being half an hour early, that old self of performing better and to be better, to be stronger, to be fitter, had returned. That tiny little, whatever you want to call it, ray of sunshine, that tiny little candle light, that tiny fire ember had relit. And I just literally stopped drinking from then. And I started training, and I went for my first run on one of my old run routes. Took me best part of an hour. It's only got 4 miles. Took me the best part of an hour. I remember going, and now we start. This is where we start from. My very first gym session, I did 3 press-ups. I did 500 meters on a row machine in about 3 minutes. And I swam 25 meters in a swimming pool and felt like I was going to drown. But every time I went to the gym, every run, every press up, every squat, every sit up, every kilogram of weight was, I'm getting fitter, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting healthier. And that became my mantra. I'm fitter, I'm strong, I'm healthy. I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm healthy. And I had this mantra. It's still with me now. It's now in my subconscious. It's completely in my subconscious. When I lie down at night, I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm healthy. I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm healthy. I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm healthy. When I'm running, I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm healthy. When I'm getting stressed with my children crying, I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm healthy. It's almost like it's my safety mechanism. It's not grab a beer. It's I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm healthy. I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm healthy. And that was the start. That was that lived with me. And then reading books. Again, YouTube wasn't YouTube. Google wasn't Google. I couldn't afford PTs, so I just did what I could. I just ran. I spoke to my brothers. I started swimming for a swimming club in Gloucester. I started speaking to the biggest guys in the gym. I started watching Arnold Schwarzenegger films. I started to work out how the body worked. I learned physiology. I learned how the muscles work. I learned how to do this system, what that system does, how to progress this, what power training is, what strength training is. And I just rebuilt myself. And it sounds really arrogant and vulgar, but I did. I literally rebuilt myself from the ground up. How I'd done so much personal development. I did so much reading. And I realized I was a very spiritual person. I don't say I'm a Christian. I don't sort of, this, but I believe in a powerful entity, in something that's greater than ourselves. If you want to call it God, call it God. If you want to call it Allah, call it Allah. If you want to call it the Easter Bunny, call it the Easter Bunny. There is something far more powerful than what this is, this skin and bone and muscle, because it's in you. It's your soul. It's your mechanisms. It's your belief structures, and you can change all of it. You can morph all of it. You can take it out, throw it away, and put new ones in. You can plug a whole new you in, because you can change your mind. You are allowed to change your mind. And that for me was a big thing, because I started having Reiki massages. And that's what led me down the spiritual route, having Reiki and understanding energy power and power through the body. And that was a big thing for me as well, my recovery, understanding the body, the mind, the spirit. So that was a big part of my recovery.
That's an absolutely incredible story. And I think for me, what I've picked up there, a few things, and again, feel free to sort of say yes or no, but I think the kid that you were, playing year 7 rugby, from your dad saying just run fast and don't go down, run in a straight line and don't go down, and then your old school teacher, you need to go for more runs and stuff like that. I think that programming that you had early on was probably key. It was all there. It was probably clouded by the drugs and the alcohol, the trauma of the crash and stuff like that. But when you allowed that 15-year-old kid who used to run around on the rugby field sort of resurface in that part of your brain to say, just be the fittest on the pitch, do skills and drills, just be better. As soon as there was a little bit of light, and I think the run, although you went out with bad intentions, you came back with good intentions. And that sort of sparked that young 15-year-old lad or younger who was chasing the egg around the pitch, with aspirations of being like Backy. And I think it's phenomenal, it really is. And I think one thing that you can't take away from that is even when you went out for that first run, even the intentions, what they were still surrounded in compassion for your family and stuff, because it was still that process in your mind of, thinking about your father and stuff like that, the family. And even still, when he said you're drinking too much, that was still the trigger there. And it was almost like back to the, don't go down, just run in a straight line, but stop drinking. Don't drink. You're drinking too much. All right. Okay. And I think that's phenomenal. It shows you the power of that programming, but we get to choose. Everybody thinks they are, because this happened to me, this is who I am. But actually, you get to choose what's on TV, and you get to choose on what program you fulfill in your life, right? Absolutely.
And I've collected an incredible range of knowledge. I know it's sometimes when I'm talking about it, it does sound a bit unbelievable, but because of my hunger for knowledge and because of my hunger to learn, I have experience. So yeah, I'll backtrack a little bit. So from the time of the crash to recovery was 2 years. So 2006, 2008, I was applying for the Royal Marines, and the naval officer at Gloucester Docks said, "Not a chance, mate. You've got too many injuries. Plus, there's a waiting list because the recession was just on the cusp, so there was a waiting list." So I said, "Okay, what can I do?" He said, "Well, the quickest way into anything at the moment is reservists." So I joined 6 Rifles, and I lied. I completely lied. They said, "Have you got any injuries?" Nope. "Have you got any this and that?" Nope. "Have you got this?" Nope. You know, I'd rebuilt my body to a point I was confident. And now having the access to joining the army, even though you could say it's only the reserves, in my mind, it was SBS. You know, in my mind, I built it up to the point where if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this properly. I'm going to train for this because I want to train for this because I have the hunger to. And I was the fittest guy in the troop. I was, and I was running around. When we went to Catterick, I did an 8:36 mile and a half, and I was third fastest in. The 2 guys in front of me were the best part of 2 stone lighter. You know, I was 14 stone, and these guys are probably 12 and a bit, little wiry guys. And the PT walked past me, he took my little number chip off me, and he looked at me. He looked up and down, looked back at the other 2, looked at me again, and just smiled because he knew I'd done something special, and that's my interpretation. You know, when a PTI in the army looks at you, who's God, let's be fair. Yeah. He looked at me, he looked back at the other 2, looked at me again, just smiled like, "Fair play, mate. You've just put a massive effort in there. Fair play." And that's when it just went, boom, I'm back. Yeah. And every Bergen march, I carried more weight. If there was an LMG or an SMG or a GPMG, I wanted to carry that bad boy. I wanted it in my hands. If there was like fireman either pepper potting, I made damn sure I was the first one up, first one down. You know, I was, sprint training, all that. It was all those years on that pitch, on that playing rugby, all coming together. My leg power from doing leg presses, because my back wasn't brilliant. I still can't squat very well, but leg pressing, pushing those out, and then going into like gun drills or ballistic lunges, power through my legs. So I could get up with any amount of weight on my back, I could just run and I could sprint, and I was doing half marathon distances. And I just felt amazing. I just felt, yes, I'm back. This is me. Royal Marines, SBS, England International. Why not? I'll be a heavyweight boxing champion as well. Solid. I'm going to be this person. I'm going to be that person. I'm going to do this. Anything was possible then. Anything was possible. And that led me down many routes. I became a PTI. I was a physical training instructor. So again, proving my fitness. And since then, so that was 2011, I left the reserves. Since then, I've done ultra marathons, London to Brighton, 100 kilometers in 14 hours and 36 minutes. I've done 3 sea swims of 2 miles at Clovelly. I've done power training. I played around with bodybuilding. I played around with Olympic lifting. I did CrossFit for 6 months. I did obstacle course racing, obstacle course coaching, long distance swimming. You name it. I've sampled it. I've practiced it. I've learned it. I've put all those bits and pieces together, and it's just a hunger. I'm just hungry for more knowledge. And it's been a wonderful journey so far. And then I played around with strongman training. That was fun. And I decided to pull a Ford Transit van, a mile. Did some good conditioning, did some good training for it. During lockdowns. So this was the David Goggins 4x4x48. Yeah. Most people would run it. I decided to pull a Ford Focus in the first 4 miles. Then I ran the next 2 blocks of 4 miles. Then at midnight, I did the Ford Transit van, did that a mile. That's a trigger point for PTSD. And then I pulled a Volkswagen Polo a mile. That's another trigger point for PTSD. Then I did a kettlebell session. Then I did a Bergen march. then I cycled 4 miles, then I ran 4 miles, and then I finished off with a 1 mile pull of a Honda Civic because I was drained. I was exhausted. So I did the full 48 miles because I went for a bike ride after the Honda. So I did the full 40 miles in the 48 hours. And in there somewhere, I fatigued my body so much that a few weeks later, I was helping a friend in a lake clearing out some weed. And we were using a car to pull the anchor, to pull the leg brake. And I thought he'd stopped. So I grabbed the rope of the anchor and went to lift up the anchor out of the water to reposition it. And he started driving again. And he dragged me 30 foot through a lake. And I sort of slammed into a stone wall. Somehow I didn't impale myself on this anchor. But I fractured my vertebrae in my lower back. So I went again from massive level of fitness to basically fracturing my lower vertebrae and having very, very, very heavy legs for about 3 or 4 months. My legs didn't really want to work. Like walking was enough. Bending over was enough. Picking up my little boy was enough. That was like, oh, this isn't right. This don't feel right. And then I had an X-ray, and it confirmed I got a fracture from my vertebrae, which had healed, thankfully. No long-lasting damage. It's just another little thing. But what do? You carry on, or you go down the other route. I've been down that other route. It don't work.
Yeah. Mate, absolutely incredible. And I think my key takeaways from this conversation, and I could keep this going, I'm just concerned of the time and stuff like that, and we'll definitely get you on because there's so much more to unpack here if you come back on. I think the biggest things for me is one is your identity that you built as a young kid in terms of always be better, instilled from your father, your PE teacher and stuff. That never goes away. So if you focus on your identity and who you are, that will serve you massively. And then the second part of it is the importance of purpose. I think we see from the crash and everything else as well, when you'd lost a purpose, you weren't working, you couldn't do your fitness, you'd lost that sense of identity and not being able to do, it can really take you off track. But actually, as soon as you found that bit of purpose and give that 15-year-old kid back that bit of light that had been ingrained at such a young age, the ability to learn, figure it out, get fit again, get stronger, really, really powerful things. Identity and purpose are the two things that really jump out for me from that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, mate?
Only briefly. If you don't enjoy it, don't do it. It's the big thing. And you can train to be fitter. You can train to be stronger. Having the right knowledge, having the right skill set, speaking to the right people. But most importantly, it's just explore and be curious about stuff. Be curious about stuff. And find little values.
There's a purpose right there. There's a purpose right there.
My new purpose is, if I can stay fit enough and strong enough and healthy enough, so running around with her, so running around my little 4-year-old, or going on 5-year-old, then all the training was worth it. Yeah. All the pain, all the suffering was worth it. And if I can, my biggest takeaway professionally is that if I can teach other people to do that same thing, to understand and to love physical activity, to embrace physical training, to embrace the education behind it, to embrace correct form, to embrace not being lazy, then I can live a life with value. And that's all I try and do. I just try and have the best knowledge, the best experience, and then teach it to people who want to learn. And if they don't want to learn, I turn people away because they're not ready yet. They'll come back to me. They might come back to me, they might not. But I say, I have a few questions I ask them. And if they're not ready for me, they're not ready for me. Because I'm, again, this does sound a bit arrogant, a bit vulgar. I'm not just a PT. It sounds horrible, but I can completely take that person and completely shut them down put them back to square one, and then completely rebuild them back up again, because I know what it's like. I've been there. I've been down that road, and I know some tricks and some traits and some pathways that will help them back to where they want to be. And my biggest love, my biggest passion is teaching people. So that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, mate, that is absolutely incredible. And I think that sense of purpose there, you've got your little ones, and obviously your passion for helping other people is absolutely amazing, mate. So, mate, I absolutely love that. That time just flew by, and we'll definitely get you back on. But guys, hopefully you enjoyed that. If you've got any questions, please do drop them in the comment section or reach out to us and we can forward them on to Tom. Tom, again, massively appreciate for sharing that story. And I'm looking forward to catching up again soon, mate.
You're welcome. The other side of that is all the psychological side, the PTSD and that sort of stuff, and the mental trauma, and the stuff that people say they want to talk about and that we should talk about, and then we don't talk about it. Yeah, if we don't talk about it, we don't talk about it. So it's important parts of all of it, because as a PT, if you can't recognize certain symptoms of PTSD, you could be training someone who is going to hurt themselves, not because of your lack of knowledge or lack of experience or lack of passion or lack of anything. Like me, the gym, the training, the exercise becomes our mechanism for self-harm. And that's a PTSD trait. And if you can recognize that and understand how to treat it, then you'll be a better PT. Actually, you'll be a better human being.
Yeah.
Because you might not be training someone, you might have a friend who goes to the gym 4 days a week, 5 days a week for 3 hours. And that's when you go, "Are you okay, mate? Are you all right?" And that's where you might find out certain things.
Well, mate, we'll definitely get you back on and we'll chat about that in more detail and stuff anyway. But I'll let you get back to the family time there. Looks like you're going to be fighting over a bit of biscuit and stuff as well. But, yes, mate, once again, really, really appreciate that, mate. And we'll catch up again soon, all right?
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Cheers. All the best.